Welcome to the most important week of the year for the podcast industry. Welcome to Podcast Movement 2025.
Welcome all to the Quill and CoHost stage. Thank you so much for joining us. I realize it's 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, so appreciate you coming out. I'm Quincy Vries. I'm the head of content production at Quill and CoHost. So Quill is a branded podcast agency. We build podcasts for leading brands, and CoHost is our analytics tool that we use to help validate all our amazing brands' data and analytics, as well as the amazing creators that we work with. So really happy to have you join us this morning to talk about attention-worthy podcast audience growth and retention strategies that win. To kick off our day here at Podcast Movement, we're here for one day and one day only, so if you want to hear more from us, it's got to be today. If you want to come and ask some questions, we'll be here, like I said, for one day and one day only. So I'll start by introducing our panelists. First, we have Steph. Steph can give us a wave. Steph is the VP of Product at Quill and CoHost, one of my amazing coworkers. We have Heather Gordon right next to me here. She's the Managing Director, Canada at Acast. And finally, I'm joined by Kelli Hurley. She is the VP Global Head of Revenue Partnerships at SiriusXM. So thank you all for joining us this morning. So I'm just going to kick right into it. I want to use all the time we have here, and if we have time at the end, I will open it up to a Q&A. So think of your questions, write them down if you can, and I'll try and get to as many people as we can. So to start, this is a question for the panel. Podcasting is growing up, as we know, but the question is podcast marketing growing up with it? So where do you think the industry still lags when it comes to growing shows and growing shows strategically? Heather, I'll start with you.
Hi, everyone. Ooh, that is weird. It's a very good question, and I think you have to remember that there is no one size that really fits all when it comes to podcasting. Every podcasting is so unique, and it's really about understanding, I think, where your audience lives, finding them and creating that communication. So is your audience also on Instagram, or is your audience more of a Discord community? And if you don't know the answer to that, you ask them, you communicate with them, you have some sort of relationship with them. Oh, and I also think it's really important to remember to look a little bit beyond the download as a way to measure your audience. If you're a consumer of your podcast, like I'm a little bit of a wellness freak when it comes to podcasting and consumption, and sometimes I have an hour to invest in long form content and to really sit back and experience the full episode. But oftentimes I'm on Instagram and I get all I need from a 30-second video clip that tells me why it's important for me to get daily sunlight in my eyes. All of these metrics are really important, so I think it's imperative that we look beyond just the download to count and understand the magnitude of your audience, and don't limit it to just who's listening to a full episodic, because there's really so much more to explore, and I think count as your audience.
Yeah, there's certainly a gap still. And to your point, it really is about meeting the audiences where they are. And we are really focusing at SiriusXM on the omni-channel experience and understanding where those audiences are and how they're responding to content across different ecosystems. So, obviously in podcasting, we're seeing growth with the audio download in certain areas, but we really are seeing accelerated growth across video and social, and also through live event experiences. There's incredible moments where audiences, are really wanting that one-to-one experience with creators they're passionate about. And so we're really trying to identify where the growth is happening in these areas and to maximize the experience for both the creator and the audience. And that's where, brands come in as well, because we want to create experiences, true viral moments between that relationship with brands and creators, so we can amplify that across these channels.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's interesting about podcasting, especially in the last few years, is that it's no longer just an audio medium, right? It's video, it's TikTok, it's newsletters, it's events, like you were saying, right? And so I think really where the industry is lacking right now is actually on the unification of all of those metrics put together. How do we get metrics from all of those different experiences normalize them to understand what's working, what's not working in terms of audience growth, what is helping with my audience engagement, what's building with my community, right? So I think that's really where we need to focus and think about, how do we unify and create insights from that.
Yeah, and it can't be the same piece of content
Absolutely.
across all of these channels. You really have to create something unique for each of these channels, which, takes a lot of work and focus.
Yeah, I think that's great. And Steph, that segues well into something I want to ask you about, which is about analytics. I know that it's something that we tend to focus on a lot, but what analytics do you think are most important? This is a big question, so I'm sorry to put you on the spot. When it comes to not just tracking, downloads, but when we're thinking about retention, and then also how to use those analytics to figure out, okay, what's the best promotional strategy? Maybe my audience, they're not on LinkedIn. This isn't working. But what analytics can I look at to say, all right, maybe they're going to go for a newsletter. Maybe they're on TikTok. What should I be looking at?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, again, because there isn't a unification of metrics in the industry at the moment, like there isn't one platform where you can go, right, and see your YouTube, your download numbers, your social media numbers. It's kind of hard because it's fragmented, but I would say as much as you can, try to unify it and understand what is having the most impact. And I also think you need to justify the impact of the different mediums in different ways, right? Every medium is going to have a different KPI or key performance indicator that you can justify it as, right? Social might be reach, right? How many people eyeballs can I get on my content? Whereas audio might be episode consumption, right? It might be how long are folks listening? How long can I engage with them? Video might be similar. It might be a combination of both. So I think determining what those different indicators are for each of the different mediums and then looking and measuring those on an active basis are really important.
And would you say, I know that we're kind of starting to think about moving beyond the download, and this is a question for everyone. Are downloads still important? Are there something we should still be looking at, or is it part of a larger holistic strategy?
It is still important. It is, something that we have to continue to think about diversifying in the space. We sell a multitude of different ways, depending on what the needs of the buyer and the brand are. So we really try to cater to the needs of the marketplace and what those diverse needs look like. And, right now, it's still an important component of our overall media mix and something that we're continuing to monitor and look at as we grow and evolve.
And listen, a podcast is whatever the audience says a podcast is. It's not really up to us to decide where the consumption should happen. At Acast, sounds similar to what's happening at Sirius. We're focused on that omni-channel distribution to, as Kelli said, to meet the audience where they are. And they're all important metrics, and I think to ignore any of them would be at the peril of the creator.
And Heather, I think a great question from that is, I know you're working with, top creators and brands in Canada, and what would you say defines a breakout podcast in 2025? I know I speak to a lot of indie creators who are frustrated. Yep. They feel like, it's all about the marketing. It's all about, how much spend you can put behind a podcast.
Yep.
So what do you think? Is it content? Is it marketing? Is it a mix of both? What really creates that breakout podcast today?
A great question. Any Canadians here? So obviously we know Canada is about 10% of the population of the U.S., which makes it all that much more challenging to get to whatever that benchmark we always hear, 10,000, 15,000 listens in order to be able to be eligible for a host read. We've all heard the numbers, but we've taken a decidedly different approach in Canada. We have the big ones. We're part of a global network of podcasts with the likes of the Teds and the Mark Marons, who drive massive numbers, but we're also hyper-focused in Canada on supporting the creator industry and supporting podcasting in general and helping the growth and health of that. And a lot of that comes from the monetization of smaller sites, podcasts. So the last year we've entered in some really interesting partnerships where we started working with some spectacular creators who are absolutely at the top of their game, but they're just not at the top of their game in podcasting. So Sarah Landry, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Birds Papaya, massive Instagrammer with millions of followers, but just a small podcast that she had launched. So we're working with Sarah to help leverage the existing relationships she's got with her community and to help her build out that podcast. And then we tie it back to the omnichannel executions where we work with brands and we amplify the messages and the custom content we create across all of our platforms. So that helps build that reach that the clients are looking for. And another example is Morgan Book, who I don't know if you're familiar with the phenomena of book talkers on TikTok. She's massive. She's got millions, multi-millions of followers on TikTok. We launched a podcast in partnership and tied some brands to that to help leverage that. Now, that doesn't answer the question about smaller podcasts that don't have the existing huge reach on other social platforms, but we do work with those, and we work very hard to find advertisers, sometimes local, that are looking for very niche podcasts, and to be able to marry the two. And nothing makes us happier than to be able to allow one of our creators to quit their day jobs and just focus on the passion and the art, and that's what we want to give back to the community.
No, I think that's great, and I'm ahead of content over here, so I think content is super important, and I tell clients I work with all the time, you can put so much spend behind a podcast, but if the content's not there, people will see it, and then why would they stay? If the content's not there, they're not going to stay. So I think it's so important that we don't lose sight of the importance of content, and I know that most people here, I'm sure, would probably agree with me, and I just want to say, don't feel disheartened if you don't have marketing spend behind you right now, or it's something that might happen, but it's not happening right now. If the content is there, people will come and they will stay. And then to Heather's point, finding those smaller people who want to work with you, finding other podcasters, I think there's still so much there. There's a lot out there right now about how, it's so much harder to do that these days, but I've seen so many people be really successful with that. So I will just say, if you're not at that spot yet, I don't want you to listen to what we're saying up here and think that, it's over or anything like that. It's not. Content is still so important, but that's my little spiel about content there. I just had to get that in. But Kelli, what do you think today, if we are thinking about people who are looking to work with brands who are maybe at that point, what makes a partnership successful, both for a brand, and a creator? And if a creator is sitting out there in the audience today, how can they better position themselves to look appealing to a brand, to work with a brand and get to that point?
Well, it goes back to even what you were just saying. It's authenticity and connection. And if the content is not there, if you're not being true and authentic to yourself, to your audience, it's not going to be compelling. People aren't going to continue listening, and you're going to lose out on a lot of opportunity, both with creating that connection with your audience and then the opportunity to grow with a brand. So I think that it's really important when we look at creators now and that connection with brands that we are really focused on where that audience is and how we grow those connections within those channels. SiriusXM just launched a Creator Connect strategy where we are focusing on our individual creators, where their strengths are and where their audiences live. We just signed Trevor Noah, and to your point, Heather, his podcast isn't as large as some of his other channels. So we're packaging in and creating connections for brands to integrate across all of these channels. And it's an exciting time, and it really poses a unique opportunity for brands because they can shape a narrative and a story within these channels that really touch the audiences in very impactful ways. So I think it's important that as a creator, you are looking at all of these different channels, how your content can be compelling within and across them, and continue to grow and focus on really your message and your narrative and your authenticity within them.
No, I love that. I think that authenticity is one of those really important things. At Quill, we work with brands, and that's really, we spend so much time with them thinking about what is this podcast going to be about, what's going to be authentic for your audience. I always tell my clients that your podcast is not an extended infomercial. You really need to think about, why would someone want to listen to this, right? So I love that. I think that's great. And a question for everyone now. This is a big one, and it's all right if you don't maybe have a succinct answer to it. When my marketing team gave me these questions, I was like, this is a doozy, but I'll ask it. If you had to choose just one growth lever, so content, partnership, data, distribution, the list goes on and on, that creators should focus on in 2025, is there one that you can pick? Or, that's a hard question, but I'm going to put it to you. what should creators be focusing on for the rest of 2025?
Yeah, it's a very complex question. Of course, we probably want to say all of them in many different forms, but I think content is king, and we are constantly looking at how do we diversify, how do we amplify, voices in this space, and it comes down to content. If you are successful at being a creator, you are spitting out content that is compelling to an audience. You're building an audience, you're building a movement and a community around you that is really exciting and compelling to brands. And how do you connect with an audience as a brand and tell your story? And podcasting and this medium is such a great place for more long form conversation. So it gives creators the opportunity to speak longer, go deeper with an audience, and brands can do that as well. So I think the growth engine there is a marriage truly around content.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the content side is definitely important. I think in regards to the growth side in particular, I always like to say that your podcast is ultimately your product. So you have to think of it objectively as a product, and your audience is your customers. So what are they buying? What value are they getting from you? You really need to nail that down. So talk to your audience. There are so many different ways that you can get audience feedback that aren't just asking them for a survey at this point. You can do polls. You can ask them what guests they want to see in the comments, right? Caller Daddy does that so well because every week she drops a new episode. They guess what guest it's going to be, and then if you read her comments, it's all people requesting different guests. That's exactly them telling her what content they want to hear, right? So there's so many different ways that you can do that and connect with your audience and understand what value you're bringing to them and what value you can bring to them. That's number one. And then number two, I would say follow the data. At the end of the day, we've been talking about all of these different tactics, putting it out on all these different platforms. Actively look at what is performing best and is it actually hitting the indicators and the goals that you set out for yourself. If it's not, maybe that's not your channel and that's okay. Maybe you need to focus somewhere else, and there's different tools out there that can measure that. CoHost has tracking links, for example, so you can create a link and that will show you whether your newsletter or your social channels or a different tool is actually growing your audience, right? So think about that, think about the tools you can use, and ultimately how you can save the most time by being smart with the tactics that you're using that are effectively growing your audience.
Yeah, all brilliant and smart. I guess my thinking would be, in addition to that, the best podcasters really make it look easy. And I sit around and I'm like, yeah, I could do a podcast because I can do that. We were talking about it last night at dinner. It's not. And I think in this day and age, you need to be really good at a bunch of things. And you can't really rely on just one thing. And data is very important because that will, obviously content is foundational, but the data and that should be able to guide you in where you need to focus your energy on. Because the reality is really good podcasters make it look easy, but behind the scenes, it's like a duck under the water. There's a lot going on, but from a top level view, it looks easy, it looks conversational, it looks like it's flow, but behind that it is typically a lot of work looking at the data and figuring out where the audiences are, how to grow, how to monetize, getting good with the monetization piece and understanding who your audience is and working with advertisers, because that's a little bit of a skill as well. So I think it's really important to lean in on a bunch of different areas if you want to be successful today.
Yeah, I agree with all of you, and I think it's so important, like we've mentioned, to have that content. But then, I talk to people all the time who are telling me, like, my TikTok strategy, it's not working. No one is coming to me on TikTok. But then we go and we look at the analytics, and it's a, 35 to 45 audience. They're using LinkedIn, and that's not to say those people aren't on TikTok, but that's maybe not where you want to put your energy. And it takes a lot of work, to Heather's point. Like, it is a lot of work to make all those cuts and put them out on Instagram and have this, omni-channel approach. So especially if it's just you, really look at the data and think, where should I focus my energy? Where am I actually going to reach people? And then when you kind of get to the point that you're thinking, all right, I'm ready to take this to the next level, you can think about it that way.
And that's the beauty of the audio space is I realize nothing is simple, but in terms of being able to pivot and make changes, it actually is a lot easier than a different medium. If you're on broadcast television and you're making a TV show and it's not working, to change the direction, to change the actors, to pivot in different ways can get really costly. But the audio space is relatively easy to test and learn. And is it because your audience isn't on TikTok, or is it because the message that you've got on TikTok isn't landing? So do you need two pieces of creative to A/B test to see and sort of discover what those results are?
I could talk about this forever, but I'm going to open it up for Q&A in 1 second. One final question for you all, which is, what is your prediction for the future of podcast growth if we're looking at 2025 and beyond? And then after that, did this just stop working? No. Okay. There was a little crackle there. Sorry. And then I'll open up for Q&A. So, Kelli, why don't I start with you?
Well, I think we're living in such an AI accelerated world right now. And when I think about podcasting, when I think about, all of the omni-channel discussions we're having today, for me, it's the human connection. It's doubling down on the human connection, and the experience and the feeling that we get when we are listening to somebody that we respect, that we admire. It's an emotional connection, and I think it's really powerful. So I continue to believe that the human connection is critical in our medium. Certainly, there are components of AI that are driving an importance that we all need to be mindful of. But I'm really excited to continue to see new creators come into the space, new connections being made, and that human experience.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I was actually having a coffee with a friend the other day, and we were talking about that, how in this day and age, we're almost starved for human connection because, we're talking to ChatGPT, we're asking these questions, whereas back in the day, I would go and ask my friend or my mom or someone, right? And so now it's like we can just use AI for that. So I agree. I think the human connection portion is going to be really interesting, and I feel like podcasting, for that reason, is such an engaging medium, and hopefully will continue to do well. I think it's such a fun question for me as a product person because I get to look at what the future is going to look like and think about all the things I can create. AI is definitely a huge one. I think right now we're in a space where there's a lot of data, it's a lot of fragmented data, and we need to figure out how to make sense of that, and AI is fantastic at figuring out how to make sense of that. So one tip that I can give everyone is if you have a bunch of fragmented data, download it all into Excel sheets, put it into ChatGPT and say, synthesize this for me, pull the best insights, what's doing the best, ask it directed questions, and it will be able to analyze that data and give you like actual insights or summaries, right? We're humans, we communicate in stories, we don't communicate in data, right? That's like a skill that some of us have learned over years and years and years, but we don't have to now. We can use these tools to be able to synthesize, grab insights, and do it really, really quickly. So that's what I would suggest and what I think the future is gonna look like.
Yeah, I agreed with everything you both said. I guess, historically I've been a little bit suspect of AI, and, I'm a big fan of art, literature, music, and I was quite paranoid about the threat of AI. But I've slightly switched my thinking. I've seen some pretty compelling demos with AI in the podcasting space, and I've sort of shifted to think, okay, AI can be very positive when it comes to producer tools. So the research aspect of it, the sourcing of guests, the ideation for episodes. There's so much that AI can do that I've seen that if you could take a 30-hour week of tasks and reduce that to 1 hour using AI, then you take the time you've saved to focus on the intangibles, the things that AI can't do, which is the human, the connection, the audience, the content. So in that regard, I see AI as a positive tool to unlock artists' time to do what it is that they do best. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
No, you guys did a great job with that. I was struggling to think of what my answer would be. But I do want to open it up. There's some audience questions. So we have a mic floating around. If you have a question, you can raise your hand, and I'll just kind of pass it to whoever I see raise their hand first. So any questions? Anyone want to ask to our panelists based on that conversation? Here we go. First one. Thank you.
Hi, nice to meet you. My name is Tyler. So I hear you all talk about find your audience and then use all the different channels. So if you're a new podcaster, you just launched and you haven't launched yet, what are the, outside of finding your audience in multi-channels, what are the key things you should be doing to grow an audience?
Can start. I think the biggest thing is product testing at the end of the day, right? If you, again, are thinking about your podcast as a product, how do you create a pool of folks that you think are your ideal listener profile? So think about what are they doing? What age, gender, income are they at? And kind of put together that general pool. Maybe it's friends, maybe it's family, maybe it's people that you know, right? That fit within that demographic. Put that pool together and have them listen to your content and say, do you resonate with this? Give me constructive feedback. If you think that they're going to give you biased answers as well because they know you, do an anonymous survey or something so that way it kind of takes the personality out of it and so they don't know who it is and then they can actually be really candid with you. That I think is really important because then you know whether or not you're actually hitting the mark on the content piece before you even put it out.
I also think market research and understanding others in a similar genre, what they're doing, and how you might be able to differentiate yourself and really stand out as a unique voice in a particular genre. So kind of understanding the full landscape of what you're jumping into and how you can really be a standout voice within that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a great question, and I'll also say to Kelly's point, I tell people all the time, people listen to more than one podcast in a genre, right? So as long as you're not making the exact same thing, I love open water swimming. I listen to like 5 open water swimming podcasts because I'm interested in it and I want to keep listening. They're all slightly different, so just make sure there's not someone doing the exact thing you want to do. And if they are, how can you be different? How can you be better? How can you be whatever it may be, right? So that's just, I think the market research is really important when it comes into podcasts as well. I saw another hand though. Perfect.
Hi there, I'm Roxanne Rodriguez. I work at a software company, and so I host our internal podcast. It's also available externally. And what I noticed, we're in about to finish season 1. What I noticed is around like episode 10 out of our 12 episodes, it was growing, and then it kind of just got stuck. What do you do to kind of re-engage audiences once the season is kind of like nearing its end, or when you feel like the audience growth has become stuck?
Hi, Roxanne. Have you looked at, what you might have been doing differently closer to the end? Like, did fundamental things change? Like, you went from one person to guest interviews. Did you if you?
Yeah, so I've kind of kept the same format where I interview 2 internal employees. So that's always been kind of my guests. I would say all of our topics are around soft skills, so like soft skill development for employees. So I'm trying to, I guess, understand like other ways to market the episodes that maybe I could do differently to bring some more engagement.
I'd wonder if maybe the idea of internal guests have maybe reached a peak, and that maybe consider external guests. Like if you're talking about it, like those soft skills, maybe there are people from outside the organization that your team may benefit from, as opposed to hearing from internal. Maybe just
Yeah,
like
that's a great idea.
Different ideas to keep the theme of it, but put yourself in the consumers, put yourself in your colleagues' point of view, and ask, and then also you've got a bunch of people that you work with that you could have a frank discussion with about why audiences are trailing off. Like, was it getting boring? Do I need to pivot and change the topics of conversation? Are the topics too safe? Like, I don't know where you work, so there's. Yeah,
I mean, you could also create some sort of call to action for your audience, get them like excited and engaged to participate with you in some way. Maybe there's a question, maybe there's a call out on social media where you ask them to do something or participate in something. That can get people really excited because they do like to be a part of a community.
Thank you so much.
We have time for one more. I saw here in the front your hand first.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Cheryl. I have a B2B podcast, the Choose for Demand Gen. So my question is it monetization to grow the audience or grow the audience to get monetization? We've never needed to make money with the podcast. That's not the purpose of it. But will engaging advertisers help grow my audience?
Kelly, do you want to?
So yes, and basically, It really depends on the content. Again, I've worked with very small shows where we are able to monetize incredibly effectively because the content is strong and the audience is highly engaged, and it might be a really niche topic that people are really leaned into. And advertisers see that, right? There are brands that are also niche and they're looking for these really critical, unique audiences that are kind of speaking in a similar language to the creator. So I think that if you have compelling content, even if the audience is small, there definitely could be advertising options for you. Certainly, many brands are looking for scale, right? So it just really depends on the brand and identifying what your niche is, what your audience really is reacting to, and finding those brands that you can partner with effectively.
All right, that brought us right to the end. So thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We really appreciate it. And thank you to our wonderful panelists as well. If we can get one more round of applause for our lovely panelists, that'd be great. Thank you.